Hello and welcome to So You Think You Can Dev, a KMS debrief on all things digital. Today, I am very excited to talk with Tom Altman, a fractional CTO with a wealth of experience in leadership. We're going to dive into some really interesting topics today on AI, data governance, and everything that you need to do to prepare. So welcome, Tom. Do you want to give us a brief introduction?
Yeah, thank you. I love the name, first of all, Eddie. This is a cool, so you think you can dev, but then I kind of feel inadequate because I don't think I'm that good at dev. I always joke I
Mhm.
became a web developer and then kind of got kicked out by the other web developers. Said, "Why don't you just manage us instead of development? We'll take care of the code from here." Ironically, maybe I can't dev that well, but I just enjoy technology. I kind of got into it about 25 years ago. Spent some time doing a lot of web development, worked for a consulting firm, worked in media, and then found my way into e-commerce, which has been very interesting. Spent about 13 years there, and now kind of rolled into this fractional CTO roles, and that's kind of where I find myself now, and find myself here talking to you, Addie.
Awesome. No, I love that you point that out because I think there's such a different skill set between actually doing the dev work, writing the code, and
Yeah.
leading a dev team. I think it's very different. And to have that kind of business eye requires a different level of skill sets and a different approach.
Yeah, and I'm old, Daddy. So when I started out, there's like three things you could do. You could do hardware, software kind of development that went on the computer. You could do web development, and you were doing hardware. And now it's like so wild to me. My son is in data analytics and finance, and the things that are done is just awesome. And I can see it happening. I just How we keep up is just amazing. It just keeps fracturing and fracturing, and then there's just more little niches that everyone goes into. So it's just wild. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think right now we're on the cusp of a lot of change. To your point, we're looking at generative AI, agentic AI, automation. So how do tech executives and leaders, how do you even prepare for all of this?
Yeah, I think after they stop crying about reading about it all and how they're maybe furiously behind, I like to get people involved in like know thyself first, right?
Mhm.
So let's make sure that we understand how this business works. Working in fractional, it's so interesting to me when I ask a leadership team, "Hey, can I see a map of the technology? What are you guys running?" It's like, well, I think we're gonna have yeah, go down to the basement and talk to Mary. She's the IT person and she can help you figure that out. It's like, okay, that's interesting. So at a corporate level, we're not exactly sure what's going on here. So I kind of call that systems mapping, which is kind of step one. And then you can start to look at like departmental sharing of these applications, process mapping, who are the people involved. And what you find quickly is a lot of people aren't exactly sure. And then it gets a little scary. It's not terrible, but now when we get to this, when we're moving into these times of automation and AI, it kind of starts to matter, right? And it's going to really matter when the agents show up. These AI agents start to show up because I think what I believe will happen, and I'd love to hear what you think. I think the agents are going to kind of take a peek at all of our processes and say, oh, okay, I've seen this before. I can help you here, here, and here. Maybe we should take a peek at this, or this. And I think that's how they're going to start to learn and know who we are as a business.
hmm Yeah, I think that one of the bigger barriers to adopting agentic AI is just the foundation, right? If you're going to feel confident enough to say, I want this agent to replicate this workflow and this job, you have to make sure that all the components of that workflow are set up correctly, or you're going to potentially exacerbate problems, maybe without even realizing it.
Exactly. It's I liken it to when you hide all the error codes, right? Like, and you don't look at them, but they're logged somewhere, and we're not paying attention to the log, and the log is growing, but no one's looking. Like that could happen with the agents. They're like, well, they don't want to see the errors, but boy, they're piling up, and it just seems like it could lead to disaster and not exactly knowing what's going on. And
Mhm.
the thing about agents is we want to use them to be more efficient, not to kind of work around or do different things. So it'll be interesting how businesses navigate this area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the the things that you're pointing out here is, how do we get businesses to better understand their systems and how they connect? So we have this problem. Why do most businesses have this problem? And how do you start fixing it?
Yeah, I mean, very few businesses that I come into contact say, we have a problem. Come in and fix this problem of us not having any systems. I'm like, hey, let's do this. This would be good to get all your processes down. We don't have time. We don't have time for that. We need the ERP system implemented today. So let's not worry about that. But because they'll have a best practice that we can leverage. It's like, well, yeah, they do. They will have their best practice, but not your best practice. So there's a number of great ideas that float around, but I mean, it all based around systems thinking and really knowing what it is that things do, what you want. Is that the intended result? Is this manual? Do we do some automatic things? And once I think you can see that, I like to use visual. I'm a visual thinker, so I like to think in workflows. And now when you can kind of see it, I can trace it through the process. You can start to see where some things might start to break down.
Hmm. And how does that fit into kind of a larger documentation strategy? Why is that so important?
Yeah, I mean, for me, number one, do we know? I mean, I've heard this term used, technology debt, before. I don't know if you've ever heard that. And it's kind of
Hmm.
like, are we using all the technology that we're paying for? Because in the land of, software as a service, everything has a monthly fee and everything has a monthly per seat fee. And there's some clearly right off the bat ways to maybe potentially do some savings on either just cutting seats down or cutting off some of this altogether. So I think that's one avenue, is like, let's just make sure you're using everything you have and having everything you use. When I think about ways to encourage, that's usually the way to get in, is through like a CFO. CFO is always willing to cut off a few more monthly fees. And they have a pretty good voice to ear to like a CEO. So if we're trying to convince a C-suite team, a CFO is a great person to talk to, because I think we
Hmm.
can start to see the efficiencies, see where the ROIs are coming. I think when you start to look at the technical staff, I think they get a little nervous when someone from the outside's coming in, because they kind of know where all the bodies are buried, if it's in terms of bad code or unused things. So that's usually a little tougher. That's usually a little tougher discussion to have, because I think all in all, I mean, all the people that I've worked with or worked for in the IT department, they always want to do the best things. I mean, it's always those people say, we wanted to do that 5 years ago. We wanted to use, we wanted to clean this up and we wanted to automate this, but we ran out of time because there were too many projects or too many this is. So I think that's kind of sometimes the formula where things start to go bad, because you sweep all the things under the rug that literally are not breaking today, so you can get that one thing done that really has to get done by tomorrow. So, I mean, I think when those things all add up, you start to see opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the same vein as of technical debt, one of the places where I feel like a lot of companies are going to start realizing, oh, we have not been keeping this well maintained, is their data.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
especially with AI. So can you talk to that a little bit? Why is data so important for AI and automation?
I would love to. I call it, I think we used security by obscurity before AI came into play. So like, just Addie figured out that she has a folder that's 7 subfolders deep that Tom's never going to find, because by the time I got to 4 levels deep, I just quit looking, right? But like, some of this stuff is buried that deep in, because somebody copied a folder over from the old shared drive and now it's on the new shared drive, but we put it in the archive of 2022 shared drive folder, which already had 3 folder structures deep, which is great, right? No one ever found it, no one ever looked for it. But now what we find, right, is the co-pilots and the Geminis and all these of the world. Well, they're like, hey, you know what we can do? We can traverse your whole network. We can check out all these files. And we can get the information you need. So when I dig in to say, well, how much money did the company lose this year? It's like, hey, I've got that in a spreadsheet right here. Here's what it is. And now we're starting to see, oh, so this data is actually available. It's not secure because it was just unfindable before. So, you
Mhm.
know, AI can help, if you want to say it in that way, or it can be, oh my gosh, what have we done? So I love to talk about data governance or data security, because the permissions that are required by some people, I think we just forget what permissions people have. And from 3 jobs ago, you had permissions for this, but we never take those away because you're transitioning. But we'll get rid of those permissions, when you get fully embedded into your new job, but it just never gets taken away and you just keep adding them up. And pretty soon, you can approve your own check, or you can approve your own billings. So it becomes one of these things that security becomes problematic at time, and some of that revolves around data, right? So and then, of course, as you well know, when these agents, when we're building our little Gen AI tools to go out and tell us how to write the next best proposal or how to write a great sales pitch, what we forget sometimes is we tend to give those bots like high degrees of security access because they need to see all the things. But what we don't want to do is extend, Addie's security. When
Mhm.
she gets to the point where she's asking questions, we have to find a way, right, to govern the agent security based on the person that's asking the question. And that's where things get a little complicated.
Yeah, I think that there's almost a little bit of a paradigm shift happening here. When we look at what is data governance in 2025, I think you have organizations that have a bunch of internal data that's not secure and not well managed. You have organizations who might be using something like a public model and trying to adapt that to their environment. And these are all different problems. So when you're talking about data governance now, what does that really mean?
Well, and that's the crazy part because what you and I might be talking about with data governance is everything that you just said when we're talking about maybe a company that's, anywhere under 100 million and probably less than 200 people. I think it's like the traditional sense of keeping data safe. Does the right people have the right access to the right pieces of data? Who can see it, who can't see it, and that. But then you kind of kick it up a notch, or you start to look at different verticals or different industries. Right now, if we're talking about healthcare, now we've got a whole nother set of problems, right? We've got this thing about who should see the data, but now we also have this thing about like there's actual legal documentation on who can see the data and what can we share, and can we share the data if it's obfuscated, or can we never share this at all? And I think that's some of what, there's like 3 definitions of the word governance in that way, right? And then you have, and then it just keeps getting worse the bigger things get. And when you're talking about, companies with tens of thousands of people, how in the world do we ever figure out who has the access to do what? And I do not envy, that problem because it's still the same one or small group of programmers that has to determine like how do we know who has the access to what and if they should. And then in this instance we're talking about some legal that we have to be careful of. In this instance we're talking about some governmental regulations. you know you can see where it gets spins out of control really really fast.
No, absolutely. And I think another part of that too is who's really responsible for data governance. Is it just the CTO? Is it just the software development team? Or is there a larger culture that needs to be put in place? Because a lot of people are accessing data for a lot of different reasons, especially internal data. And I think that that's something that more organizations need to recognize.
Yeah, when the GDPR came out, I can't remember, it's been maybe pushing 10 years ago now, and they're trying to protect people's privacy, right? I mean, then they created automatically this like CDO role, like who's your chief data officer? And it was almost always the CTO that would just sign that paper, and then, but if you look at the fine print and you look at the legal precedents, the CEO is ultimately going to be the one that's in trouble and probably sitting on the in the witness stand, right, when this comes to play. And the funny thing about it is so many of the CEOs, they have no idea what we're talking about. I mean, unless they're just a super savvy CEO, there's so many times when they default that down to the IT department, and that can be a dangerous game, I think, depending on, and I mean, as companies get bigger, they of course scale and you have a legal department and things like that. But wow, I mean, it's no wonder why it takes so long sometimes to get some of the stuff figured out, because when it comes down to it, nobody really knows.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that until you have organizations kind of put a really clear process and structure and build that culture, to your point, maybe that requires some documentation of systems and how people should manage data for their own teams. then it's not going to be anyone's responsibility.
I
And
love it.
it's not going to be adopted.
Yeah, and the irony there is that might be a really cool place for some sort of a data governance AI to help, right? I mean, like maybe you can get quizzed by the AI agent to say, what are you using this for? And like who's the intended end user? And the questions that we know we have to ask, but not every time we know the answer.
No, absolutely. And I know we've just talked a lot about problems, but let's bring it back. Let's bring it back to value, right? So how do you as a business leader, there are a lot of things you're probably going to have to put into place and overcome to get the value from AI. But how do you create kind of an aligned business strategy to generate that value and that growth?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we see, I'll just use a finance department as an example. What we're seeing is, we're looking at a finance department of a mid-sized company. Maybe they have 6 people in the finance team, and the CFO will say, that's a lot. It's probably more people than we need. But how can we make this more efficient? And what we see is a lot of these teams have maybe been around for a while. So, I mean, this is a real world scenario. Customer said, we have 6 people. 2 of them are going to retire in the next, 18 to 24 months. Can we find a way to make sure we understand all the processes and the things they do? And now can we take and automate and leverage AI to like maybe as they start to retire, we can start to just, help automate for the other 4 that'll be left and help them out. I mean, that's one real world scenario. And I think if we look at different departments, whether it be attrition, whether it be retirement, whether it be, hey, we just have to do some other things. We're getting more responsibilities here. How do we make it more efficient? And, so many things that like the accounting team does, my time in e-commerce, there were so many times when it was like, if if the invoice and the PO match and everybody agrees that they match, do we really need to have somebody manually check a box to say that they match? Wouldn't it be nice just to do the 80-20 rule and say 80% of these match, let's just approve them? And then let's spend our time checking out the ones that don't match and maybe understanding why they don't match. And those were one of those ways I can easily say that it's an efficiency, and it's in almost every business. Every finance team has those problems.
Yeah, absolutely. So find those smaller areas, it sounds like, where you can identify kind of a really clear answer. It's a yes or no, it's a this matches, this doesn't. And then the more you can really understand the decision-making process behind that, the better placed it is for potential automation or AI integration.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's an easy decision, and then it's also could be a high value because we spend a
Mhm.
lot of time on that easy decision. And when you have those two things match, it's an absolute great place to look.
Awesome. No, that is, I think, a great piece of advice and a great thing for listeners to take away. Now, Tom, we are coming up at the top of the hour, so I want to ask, is there any piece of advice that you'd like to give to technology leaders for them to walk away with?
Yeah, I mean, I think just be honest with yourself, right? Like, are we really in a place where we have our systems mapped? Do we feel like the processes that we have documented already are something that we feel comfortable about? Could Addie go away today and tomorrow someone come in and yeah, maybe it'll be a little slower, but can they really get that job done? I think when you can say yes to that, I think you're finding yourself in a pretty darn good place sitting in 2025 being ready for what's to come.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tom. This was a great conversation. I think it's got a lot of my wheels turning. Hopefully, listeners, it's turning your wheels a little bit too. Thank you so much for tuning in to So You Think You Can Dev, and please stay tuned for our next episode next week. Bye.